All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. As always, I'm your host, Redbeard. And today, joining me once again, I have Charles back. And man, it is going to be, like I was telling Charles, I had a whole plan for this weekend. I had everything planned out. It was all perfect. And then for whatever reason, my sleep schedule was all messed up. So I was up, surfing the interwebs and X, and I started seeing notifications pop up for the attack on Iran. And I'm like, well, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning at this point, and I'm just like, oh, well, that pretty much just screwed up my whole itinerary for Saturday. So this is the pivot that we're making. We're gonna go through the Iran situation, the war that Israel and the U.S. have started, and we're going to try and hit a little bit also on Epstein, because I don't want to steer away from that. It's still very relevant, and I don't want these people to ever escape the righteous humiliation and attention that we ought to bring to that subject. And then we're also going to try, maybe if time permits, we're going to try and talk about some two-way stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of the itinerary. Without further ado, I'm going to let Charles kind of introduce himself or whatever he wants to say for the opening statement, and we'll hit the ground running. Charles, thanks, brother, for coming back. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about what we have tonight, but also not thrilled that we have to talk about it, to be honest.
100%. Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are a bit unnerving and make you feel really a little not the happiest. Let's just
Right.
put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's one of those things, honestly, that I feel everybody kind of knew was coming. You could feel that pressure. Matter of fact, I even think that the last time that I had you on, we had briefly talked about this in the mix of Ukraine and a whole bunch of other things. And, we had talked about, man, it's coming soon. Like, everybody can feel it. We had talked about, the usual strategy of like, oh, we're going to negotiate and we're going to sit down and we're going to have conversations. And, the crazy thing is from everything that I've seen, and I could have missed some stuff. I'm fallible. I don't, I'm not omniscient and I can't see everything. But from what I have seen, Khomeini and the Iranian regime were willing to make some concessions, and they had even said that, and they were willing to actually, I think, even go all the way down to like I think somewhere near zero in terms of production for nuclear material, and and this should have been something that I think would have been agreeable, but as time went on, there's it's kind of the same old, right? To where it's like the last time we had them in negotiations, all it was a stalling tactic. And so,
Yeah.
it's, I feel like we're kind of back where we started the first time. And there's a quote that I thought was, it kind of made sense for tonight. It was by Thomas Jefferson, which, mind you, I always have like a little pocket constitution. I love having them. Honestly, like a lot of places, I think they're a couple dollars, maybe 99 cents. Some of them, I think, still even maybe do it for free. I'm not sure. But there's a quote that says, in questions of power, then let no more be heard in confidence of man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. And that was by Thomas Jefferson. And people might wonder, why is it that I bring that up? And the reason for that is you have a president that honestly, and look, he's not the first president to be this way. I just want to be clear about that. But we do, with the president that we have right now, this is a guy who told, Judge Andrew Napolitano, like, I don't have to read the Constitution. I have people for that. He feels that he can get away with carte blanche. He just kind of makes things up as they go. Take the guns first, due process later. It's a theme with this guy to where he makes the law, whatever it is that he wants to make it. And, whether you agree with the guy, whether you disagree with the guy, the reality also exists. The fact that there are people around him that ultimately are going to create his perception, which is where that danger of, I have people that tell me what the Constitution is, that's where you get that danger. And it sets a very, very damaging precedent, not just for domestic policy, but for foreign policy. So I hope that kind of gave you something to bite off of right away there, Charles. So if you want, please take it away.
Yeah, so when we talked last time, I think that I said that Trump would do something, but that he was going to be more of it was going to be more bluster, and it was going to be like a show, and then there would be a reaction. And I think we might be past that at this point. I mean, his announcement was very clear about an all-out regime change. So he's going farther than I expected. Now, they have not said yet that they were going to talk about actual like boots on the ground, really. I mean, I'm sure there's like somebody on the ground, like special forces or something. But so far, they're just talking about an air campaign, and it's not just a short air campaign. I mean, I've heard multiple days, if not weeks. I heard up to 4 weeks, but I'm not positive about that.
Sure. And
then I also heard one of the military guys, and you don't really know exactly what's true or not because they're all saying different things, and they don't want to release their plans. But my understanding is that they're going for leadership first, which is probably over at this point. They're going to try and go in, take out as many people as they can, and then they're going to go for defense systems, and then missile systems, and they're supposedly going to take out the whole Navy. They said they're going to sink the whole thing.
Right.
And so that means that at this point, it's a much more all out war than I was honestly anticipating. Yeah.
Right.
I definitely anticipated them to try things. And I also anticipated that if, for example, there was a bunch of people to rise up, that at that point you would see us get involved. Like we would wait until the streets were full of people and it was just chaos, and then we would go in and try and topple the regime. But at this point, it looks like that didn't succeed, and now we're going in to try and topple the regime. It's definitely a little bit more than I was expecting. And you mentioned the Constitution. I don't carry the U.S. Constitution around. I have a copy on the bookshelf, but I keep a copy of. If we cannot blur it out, oh well, can't see it. I keep a copy of the Michigan Constitution because I'm from Michigan, and that's that's what I care about. And it's surprising how little people know about their state constitutions.
100%.
A little tangent, but a lot of people say, and the Department of Education, at the federal level, it's not in the Constitution. At the state level in Michigan, it is in the Constitution.
Right.
That you have to have education. That doesn't mean a Department of Education. That doesn't mean public school. It just means that everyone has a right to education. It's our Bill of Rights.
Sure.
So understanding the Constitution, I agree with you, is very important. And it's also really important to understand your local Constitution or founding documents as well, because local is really important. So anyway, away from local, let's get back into the foreign policies.
Well, no, and just to tee off on that real quick, it is a very important area that I think does deserve attention. It is very overlooked. It's something that I think a lot of people are not well versed in, which, all that being said, a lot of people aren't very well versed into the U.S. Constitution in general. So, I mean, it's kind of to be expected at this point. You have people that, and this will obviously segue into foreign policy, but you have a lot of people that also, they really, really like to cherry pick, the war powers. You have a lot of people that like to cherry pick the foreign policy portions and this and that. And there's like, oh, the president can do this. Even in the war powers, there is still a requirement for Congress to provide approval. And if they say no, he has to cease. Like I'm not making that up. It's not my opinion. This is what is clearly defined within the war powers. And, and for whatever reason, people don't like that. They're just like, no, it's like, this is what it is. And, it's like, dude, I'm not even going to say I'm sorry because I'm not apologetic about this. It's the simple fact that we live in a society today to where we've seen increasingly more and more every single time, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, they like to usurp and use the Constitution in order to get their way. And, to be fair with both parties is to varying degrees, whether it's immigration, whether it's warfare, whether it's the firearms, whether it's whatever. And, it's when you can't provide it in a context that is full and when you don't actually fundamentally understand what the wording is. And I come from a position to where I see it the way that the founders did, which is words mean something. Legally, they mean something. They have weight, they have potency, they have. Now, does that mean that they can enforce themselves? Absolutely not. But it should not be lost on the fact that when they drafted and ratified the Constitution, it meant something. And so when we go into something like, strikes and the limited strikes and it's interdiction, or we're trying to do this, or we're trying to help these people, we have to come back down to this level to where people fundamentally understand the way that we're supposed to conduct our war. And, in terms of how the founders understood, for instance, I have to find my notes here, how they essentially understood what warfare was. What were the confines of war? Well, the founders' definition of war, and I think I posted this actually in one of the discords, but it was the founding era legal definition, which is war is the state that exists when one sovereign uses force against another sovereign in order to compel its will. Now, when you look at that definition and you evaluate what is said, how it's said, there is no parameter on, oh, well, a missile, or, oh, a bomb, or boots on the ground. No, it was considered the use of force, which it is not given a parameter. It's not given a size, a scope, a scale, or anything like that. The simple use of force of one sovereign upon another. And I think that context is incredibly important, because when we talk about adhering to the Constitution, when we talk about foreign policy, especially when it comes to war making, it's important to understand the thought process that we are founded on. And I know, and I'll yield the floor here in a second. I know a lot of people, they examine stuff like this and they're like, oh, like the founders aren't around anymore, things change, whatever. People have to remember the founders saw a lot. They went through a lot. Britain went through tons of wars, tons of empire building, tons of, dealing with like insurrections and so many other things and piracy. And they fundamentally saw what came from just never ending war. And so they took that and they applied it, and they're like, hey, what's not a great thing? You know how we don't bankrupt ourselves and usurp people's earnings, and how we don't turn ourselves into a serf state, is by understanding what war is, having a clear definition of how we see war, and then laying out the parameters in which we can legally pursue war. And in most cases, if not all cases, I would argue the founders always came from a position to where if America was to go to war, it would be defensive in nature, and even in the repulsion of an attack. I was going to say unless, but even in the repulsion of an attack, there was no realm where they were like, what we need to do? We just need to go attack people because we think that they're a threat. So I yield the floor on that if you want to take that and run with it.
Yeah, well, multiple founders said not only was war something that needed to be decided by Congress, and that's in the Constitution. I understand there's lots of people right now throwing around these War Powers Act and stuff, some of them in the 1970s, thing from the early 2000s that got us, the war on terror. Right. It really doesn't matter, because if you look at the Constitution itself and the writers of the Constitution, they specifically stated in the Constitution who gets to declare war. They also, when writing the Constitution and asked about it, they said the president does not have that power at all.
Correct.
They're not able to. And not only that, but multiple founders said that a standing army, they called it an army at the time, but we can just call it the military, a standing military, or a war department, with actual forces. They considered that a threat to liberty at all times. Yes. And I'm not talking about one founder, I'm not talking about two founders, I'm talking about the majority of founders considered it a threat to liberty. They considered a president being able to declare war unilaterally as a king. And in fact, they were so worried about a king that it wasn't until, I believe, Wilson, that a State of the Union address was even made, because because the State of the Union address, that is based on the king or queen of England addressing Parliament in England after their war, where Cromwell rose up and kicked the king, I believe Charles, unique name, but whatever. I believe they took the King of England, Charles, and I think they beheaded him. And then when the next king came in, I forgot what his name might have been, Charles II or something. When the next king came in, they then made sure that he reported to, but they wanted to make sure he never entered the Parliament. And I think the king still has to ask permission to get into Parliament or into certain areas of London or something. So that's how serious it is to not allow the president to just unilaterally declare war. Correct. Why there is a process, and there was a lot of consideration. And really, it's really scary to see all the people who say, well, in here it says the president has 60 days. Well, okay, let me ask this question. If the president takes us to war for 60 days, but it's not a war, but for 60 days, the 60 days comes up and Congress goes, we don't want to go to war. The people that we've been fighting a war with, what do they say?
Right.
Do they just say, okay, yeah, I guess, whatever. And I mentioned it today that, and this is an and or, that Congress should meet. Because I'm seeing a lot of congressmen that I want a report from the president. I want to know what's going on.
Right.
No. The Congress should meet. They should demand answers. Yes. And if they agree that a war should occur, they should declare war and initiate impeachment proceedings, because this is, regardless of whether the war is justified or not, this is impeachable. This is completely wrong, what's being done. So impeachment proceedings, regardless whether you agree with war or not, should be put forth. And, unfortunately, we had Russiagate and all these other, BS hoaxes trying to take Trump down, that impeachment's not going to mean anything, along with the fact that the Republicans are in control of the Senate at the moment, or have enough votes to keep him from actually being convicted. And in this environment, we're so partisan. We don't even care about the facts. We don't care about anything of that nature. And I think, later on tonight, when we start talking about Epstein, we'll start to understand, and we'll probably get into a little bit about the facts and things of that nature.
Right. Well, and when you look at, and a lot of people have kind of pointed out, I know Daniel Davis did something actually quite early this morning, and I had an opportunity to listen to him and Matt Ho. I'm not sure if you're super familiar with Matt Ho, but he's been on there quite a few times. And, and they were talking about the fact, like, everybody comes around and they can, they constantly are just like, oh, the missiles, the nukes, all of these different things. But, we're back with, again, the same old tired rhetoric that even the CIA, the intelligence analysts that have gone through, they've sifted through, they've looked at all the intelligence, they've gone through all of these different, pieces of information. And what did they find? They found that there's no credible piece of information citing that Iran even had a usable, operable nuclear missile. Now, does that mean that maybe it couldn't have potentially existed? If it did, we sure as heck didn't know about it, because all of the intelligence was to the contrary. And, and it's like, on top of that, you have this whole thing to where at first there's like, oh, it's not about regime change. And this was the whole 12-day war thing, right? It's not about regime change. That's not what it's about. Now we're back to this whole thing to where it's like, no, you know what? We really are just going to go with that one. And, and it's, what I will say is it's an information chaos right now. It's becoming so hard to figure out what the heck they're even trying to accomplish. I mean, if you look, and Daniel Davis on his show kind of pointed this out, because Matt Ho was talking about the broad set of what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, you're talking about something with all of these goals and all of these mission, or within this mission set. You're talking about not a small operation. It's not an operation that would take a couple days, a couple hours. You're talking about something that has large scope and scale that requires a very heavy amount of force. They're trying to go after the stockpiles. They're trying to essentially demilitarize the entirety of Iran. Iran has a population of 90 million people, mind you. And then you're also talking about, on top of that, taking out the leadership. Now, I've seen varying reports, but I haven't seen anything legitimate to this point, because the only sources are coming out of Israel right now, which is Khomeini's dad. I'm going to give that some time, because the last time they tried to claim that, he just happened to pop back up again. It's such a tenuous situation, but the bottom line is they continue to ring this whole like dinner bell of, well, they're they're, for whatever reason, they're like this existential threat to the United States. And notice how they have to constantly doctor this up. Well, they're a threat to the forces in the region. Okay. And then they're a threat to our allies. Okay. But now they're a threat potentially to the homeland. Okay. Well, all of the things that, especially that Mr. Bibi Netanyahu's been saying for the past 30 years about them having a nuclear weapon, has not materialized. Again, going back to the information and the intel that the CIA themselves has even admitted, which is a kind of a big thing for the CIA. But it's like, what is the story? What is the mission parameter? What does the end game look like? What is, where is this all leading to? And none of these people seem to fundamentally understand, in the end of the day, with all of the things that they've charted out, all of the goals, all of the criteria that they need to see met in order to feel like it's mission accomplished, not to use a Bush era slogan, but the amount of logistics, the amount of assets, the amount of power that is needed to be projected in that region is going to be a lot more than I think people realize. It's not going to be a done and cooked over type of situation. And, like Daniel Davis said earlier today, it's one of those things to where, with the scope of the operation, you're going to need boots on the ground to go into the crevices, to root out all of these things, and you're going to have to get your hands dirty. So taking all of that into consideration, we can also address some of the comments, because I think there's a couple decent comments here too. Given all of that, Charles, like I think a lot of people are stunned. I think based off of Venezuela and the 12-day thing, we thought it was going to be just like wrapped up, like we thought, because I'm pretty sure the United States didn't even come in on the 12-day thing until like at least halfway through, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of fuzzy, but I don't think initially they were there on the onset. But where do you, what is the ladder of escalation that you see going from here? Because the goals don't seem to make sense for the strikes that they did. And it really leaves and begs the question, what's going on? And mind you, there's some pretty intense videos coming out of Tel Aviv. And as far as I know, Iran is still pursuing military operations in terms of missiles and drones, like to a pretty heavy extent. So,
yeah, I don't really know how you get out of this, or I don't know how Trump backs down. So he might be able to. So we thought when we went into Venezuela that he would have to put in the I forgot her name. She won the Nobel Peace Prize, but we thought that he would put in the rightful ruler in there, whatever that means. And kind of like what we did in Iraq, where we went in and we're going to swap the whole admin. We're going to get rid of all the people who are running the country. We're going to put a whole new set in. And he didn't do that. He let the regime stay in power. He just took out one person and said, hey, play ball or else you're next.
Right.
And, he might, for example, if he gets the supreme leader and then he gets maybe the president booted and then, negotiates a little bit, he might be able to pull a similar thing in Iran to be able to back down a little bit. But his explanation of regime change, that's pretty total. I don't know how you back down from that. One thing he did say, I believe it was later in the day, is he said that how do you say it? disloyal members of the military or whatever. There's people who want to stop fighting. They want to give up. They're done. And there's Iranian patriots who are coming in to run the government. And when he said that the military and the police should join them.
Yes.
So what he's saying is that he's saying that the regime should join. So he might be trying to play this thing where, well, I got rid of the president, I got rid of this, and some somewhat dissident, leader who's not too dissident for the regime steps up, and they say, okay, the regime is now less bad because they've joined the moderate people who don't want to destroy Israel or something like that.
Right.
But I'm not really sure that's really possible. I'm sure something like that might happen, but one thing is, I don't know how we maintain supplying Ukraine, which I think is doomed anyway, but I don't know how we maintain supplying Ukraine and continue this war. That's a lot of military. Like, Iran is what? At least twice, if not 5 times bigger than Iraq. I can't remember
it's a very, very large country.
It's very large, and it's hard to traverse. It's not like
it's very rugged.
It's not like it's open. You just drive through it. Like you have to go up mountains. You have to. It's going to be difficult, and fighting in there, if you get on the ground, it's going to be extremely difficult. So I don't really see how you back down until you get a complete regime change.
Right.
But then again, Trump has been saying that there's a way for them to join. So he might mellow. But I think that the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, has to go, and I think the president has to go in his mind before he can claim anything. And then also he has to de-arm a lot of their missile stuff. Now he's moved it past the nuclear, because in the negotiations that we were told Friday, the Iranians agreed to not process uranium. That they weren't going to do any of that.
Right.
So they weren't going to enrich. So they agreed to a lot of our terms in that way. But now they want ballistic missiles to not be made and things of that nature. There's going to be a little touchy. Now, you mentioned the chat earlier, and I do see one. This is that asked about the question: the founders were only anti-interventional because they were too weak to win. So there's several different. That gets a little more complicated when you're talking about, was the United States founded to be non-interventional because we were too weak, because we just couldn't beat the British or the French or the Spanish at the time? And there is a debate there. Now, I do think the country was founded to be a little bit more anti-interventionist.
For sure.
I definitely think that's shown based on how we operated. Even though you might hear about, going after the Barbary pirates and things, these were done in a systematic way. And how we handled the French, which is where the Alien Sedition Acts come from, which are being used in immigration right now. But a lot of that stuff was incremental. It wasn't, and it was very difficult to discuss. And we had presidents that were definitely non-interventional, and when I say non-interventional, I'm not saying they weren't expansionist, like out west and into the rest of the continent.
Right.
I'm saying that they weren't interventionists, like they're going to go, create colonies all over the place. And I don't think that was a plan. Now, there were a couple of founders who did write about basically creating a better British Empire or a better Britain, which at the time would mean that you would be creating a better empire that ruled the whole world. Right. There were a couple that wrote about it, and they discussed it. And I forget which one specifically.
Sounds like a very Hamiltonian thing.
Yeah, well, I think Jefferson had some leanings as well, but
yeah, I don't know if it was Hamilton, but I do know what you're kind of inferring, though.
Yeah, but one of them definitely he wrote like a when he was young. We're talking years before the revolution. We're
Right.
talking, he wrote a series that it came out later, I believe, after he died, where he was straight up writing about like how he thought that a better system could be built in the British Empire and it should rule the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he participated in the revolution, and he was one of the very prominent founding members. I can't remember which one specifically, but overall, though, I do think that they were non-interventionist overall, and they had seen what the cost of empire was, and it wasn't really worth it, especially when you could just expand into the continent. So I think that the problem is that, one, the Constitution, when we first founded the country, there was the Articles of Confederation.
Yep.
And then when the Constitution came into play, I think we moved more towards a potential of intervention. But then over the course of time, there's been, I think, a purposeful bad faith interpretation of the Constitution,
for sure,
that is leading us into the situation we have, and that's centralization of government. Like, for example, the most recent court case with the tariffs. Yes, the tariffs were struck down, but there's one big problem with the tariffs that got struck down, is the Supreme Court did not actually handle the fact that Congress was delegating its authority, which is explicitly prohibited.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's a major problem. Yeah, they said, "Oh, Trump, you can't do this. It's not an emergency. That's not that's not good faith of the law."
Right.
But they didn't strike down the fact that Congress was delegating its ability to tax.
Correct.
Which is their fundamental responsibility, not the president's. Cannot be delegated.
Yep.
It's unconstitutional at all. And they didn't do anything about that. So the problem is that we have interpretations of the Constitution such as this, and past precedence does not mean that you're allowed to do something.
Right.
Just because,
good clarifier.
Just because Clinton bombed Iraq doesn't mean that we can bomb Iran. Like, that's not how it works.
Right.
Even though they claim that's how it works. At the same time, the Supreme Court has failed over and over and over and over again to hold the reinterpretation of the Constitution, to force different branches of government to do what they're told to do.
Right.
And on top of that, though, some institutions like Congress has failed to assert their responsibility. Every single representative should have been screaming to high heaven that the ability to do tariffs, which is a tax, comes from the House. And they should have been going hard on it. Trump could have proposed it, but they have to make legislation and do it for it to actually apply. And they didn't. And so, and then the Supreme Court didn't say, "Hey, you need to do your job." And I have a feeling at this point that, it's just such a mess, and so many people don't understand and purposely bad faith interpret the Constitution. It's going to be really hard to rein it in. And so now at this point, we are somewhat of an intervention. We are an interventionist empire situation.
It's there really is something to where it's like when you start to see Congress and various parts of the government start to abdicate their duties and their responsibilities and be like, like, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Like, look, he'll do just fine. It's like, no, like, that's, quite frankly, that's one of those things to where people should be like, okay, well, if you voted for this to occur, or you just allowed this to occur, which is more of the common thing, right? If you just allowed an abdication of your responsibilities and duties, then you don't need to even represent my state anymore, because not only are you abdicating the responsibility that you're supposed to have in Congress, but that's going to ripple and send shockwaves through the individual states. So, you're not wrong. And I think when you look at warfare and you look at especially what's going on with, Iran right now, you have a lot of people that are very much for this. I'll never understand that. Again, it's this idea to where it's just like, oh, like we have to, wait, like there was no other choice. They were going to attack us, eventually. That's how it almost always is, like eventually. But it's, it still becomes an art, not necessarily an argument, but rather a good debate to where it's like, no, like there was no evidence whatsoever that they had any plans tomorrow, next month, the next 4 years, that they were ever going to come and attack us. And look, I've said this before, and this might rub people the wrong way, but you want to know the most effective way for people, especially when it's military personnel, to not be attacked is to not have them in countries they don't belong and have them back home here defending our own borders. And some people might say that's harsh or that's mean or whatever the case is. Look, that's the reality of it. It's like if you go and decide, like, could you imagine if you go into some other place and you just start setting up shop, and then you're shocked that somebody comes over and punches you in the face because you're like, oh, like you attacked me. It's like, well, yeah, you're not you're not supposed to be here, my guy, and it's like, well, yeah, but you still have to come into another country. Okay. Well, still, we have a quarrel with this other country, and the fact that you're there, I don't know, man. Like you can't. There's this whole thing to where, again, you couple this also with people who are justifying the over 800 military bases around the world, and then they always go on this repeated conversation about, oh, we have to, there has to be a respect for a country's sovereignty. Well, what respect exists there? Because if we're going to look and you have people that make the argument of like, well, the country invited us to set up a base there. Okay, but we know that governments will do things that are very unpopular with the people. So what does the people have to say about that? Because if you look at people in these various countries, they don't want us there in many ways. And there's a lot of people that want nothing to do with the Russia-Ukraine war. But yet you have the governments that still advocate sending millions upon billions of dollars to Ukraine, pissing their own livelihoods away. And what do they have to show for it? They have, they can't even fund basic things like clean streets, decent housing, or whatever the case is. I mean, I made the argument a couple of days ago to where it's like, dude, if you're at least going to rob me, have something to show for it, like give me a clean road. That's all I want. It's just a clean freaking road. But we can't even do that here in the United States, which I think is kind of pathetic because we have to piss money away to places like Ukraine, to Israel. We have to fund their wars. And it's not just those two, but they tend to be the most prominent ones right now. And it's ridiculous. And then you continue to see this whole thing whenever we set up bases anywhere near there and they get attacked, we're all of a sudden astonished. Like this is an attack on American sovereignty. It's like, well, it never would have happened if you weren't in somebody else's backyard, because you put a military base somewhere outside of the United States. I'm not saying America couldn't get attacked, but what I'm trying to say is it's a hell of a lot less when you're keeping your people at home. And there, I'll kind of leave it off on this, and I'm going on a little bit of a rant here, but look, I do tend to agree with a number of people that have said over the years that the military bases are nothing more than an existential red line to where it's a tripwire to where if they're there and we freaking get attacked, then that justifies us going to war. It does not justify us going to war. Not at all. And I would argue that the most America first, real defense, pro-military thing, if you want to call it that, is not having our people perpetually in harm's way in a place that they don't belong. Pure and simple. So when we look at the Iran situation, you look at the bases and you look at some of the places that have been hit, whether they're evacuated or not, it never needed to happen. It never needed to happen. So, I mean, this is what we're dealing with, man. It's a freaking clown show. And they will make an argument all the time to justify it.
yeah, it's not just a clown show. A lot of it is just straight up evil. I mean, a lot of these we heard, what was it, Syria last year? There were a couple of National Guard members who died.
Yeah.
These are people who they sign up for. At this point, I don't understand if you're signing up for the National Guard. I personally don't understand why you don't think you're going to be treated like somebody in the Army or sent somewhere awful.
Right.
Like, I don't understand why you wouldn't think that at this point. I could totally understand, like, when, back in 2000, that attitude. But at this point, you're going to get deployed and you're not going to be supported. I have yet to talk to National Guard troops who say, oh, yeah, we had all the proper supplies. We had everything we needed. Everything was great. Everyone, like, I know a guy who he said he was in Syria and they handed him a handgun and said, yeah, you're going to go out on patrol. And he goes, dude, like, he was like a info. I don't know exactly what he did, but he did, like, communications.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, we're going to send you on patrol. And all he had was a handgun. He's like, well, do you have some stuff? And so these, like, we're taking National Guard people that are totally unequipped. I'm not saying they're not trained well. I think a lot of them are trained well. But we're taking unequipped people and we're putting them in tripwire situations. I personally think that it's straight up evil. I'm at the point where
for sure.
It's just evil. It's on purpose. They, think of the worst thing you could think of, and that's exactly what's happening, because they want people to die. They want someone to die to justify whatever they want to do, and that's completely wrong. And their justifications are complete BS anyway. I mean, for how many years have we heard, oh, this, 10-century long history or whatever the heck it is that Putin says about Ukraine is complete BS. It's like, well, Kyiv used to be Russia's capital at one point in time.
Yes.
I don't think that means that Russia owns Ukraine today. It's a totally different time. But I totally understand. Yeah, he thinks historically it is Russia. Okay. That doesn't justify what he's doing.
Right.
But Trump is sitting here talking about, well, something that happened back in the 80s or the 70s or the 50s or whatever. You talk about stuff that happened during Jimmy Carter, stuff that happened during Reagan. By the way, when the shit happened with Reagan said, we're done. I'm out. And he pulled everything. He said, we're done. We're out of here. We're not doing this. Which, I mean, I give him some props for that. But, but Trump is, like, citing these things that are so old. And, he had
a crazy list of stuff. He was even talking about, oh my gosh, what was it, the USS Cole? He brought that up. He's like, oh, the Iranians were responsible for that. It's like,
well, wasn't that was Al Qaeda? That was Bin Laden. Bin Laden is dead. Bin Laden's dead. We defeated Al Qaeda, didn't we? Oh no, we made him president of Syria. I'm sorry. We made Al Qaeda president of Syria.
Yeah, it's only Jelani, though. He's in a suit and tie, and he's a lot more official now, Charles. Come on now.
Yeah. Terrorists in suit and ties are much better, and they look good in the White House. But but he's going back in time, and I'm like, this sounds just like Putin's arguments for Ukraine. This is ridiculous. And I laughed so hard because, someone was like, oh, 1978 or 9. The Iranians did something to us, and then someone said, oh, 1953 or 4, we overthrew Iran. Yeah. And then someone commented on the bottom, way back in the day, Persia invaded Athens.
Yeah, right.
Iran's the original aggressor. And that, I mean, it's a joke, but still, it's like, okay, I guess, we can go all the way back to Athens. Yes. Back to 300. Let's go. Yeah, let's go back to the movie 300. That's exactly what we should use to justify. We're still fighting the war from the movie with guys in spandex or whatever the heck it is. But it's ridiculous. And so the justifications don't make any sense. And if you use those same justifications and say that those are okay, then I don't understand how you can argue against Putin's justifications. So you look super hypocritical the whole time.
Well, right. Yeah.
And I was listening to some of the speeches at the UN a little bit earlier today. Actually, I think like Israel was talking at like 5:30 or 5:45.
Yeah.
And you have the United States that talks, and they're like, "Oh my, it's horrible that Iran is bombing all these countries." And it's like, wait a second, no. I understand Iran launched missiles into UAE, Saudi Arabia, all these other places, but that's where U.S. bases are. So
Yep.
yeah, yeah. And Pakistan stands up and says, Iran killed one of our people. Like, well, where was this Pakistani person? Oh, they're on a U.S. military base in a different
Right.
country.
And right
You
now they're
know?
fighting the Afghans.
Yeah. So wait, what? Like Pakistan was complaining about Iran,
Right.
and then Iran comes in and they list off all these things, and they're like, basically they just say, we didn't start this. What's going on?
Yeah.
And then Israel comes in and goes, yeah, you did start it. You said you wanted to wipe us off the map, and that's what they wanted in World War II
They've
or
been
something
saying
like
that for decades at this point. It's kind of
that.
it's kind of one of those things to where it's like the same thing with Bibi when he's all like, "Oh, they're gonna have a nuke. It's gonna be in like 20 minutes, guys. Seriously, just believe me."
Yeah.
And then 30, 40 years later, everybody's just like, "Okay, well, we're still waiting. We're still waiting." And it's
Yeah.
like, look, in the end of the day, it even if they did have one, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
like it's the Israelis have had a quote unquote secret nuclear project for a long time, much of which they had stolen from us to develop
Yeah.
their own systems. It's like, so you only see yourselves as being the dominant faction in the Middle East, and this is a point that I was hoping I was going to be able to make. I didn't know where I could put it in, but look, it is about time that Israel, if they're as strong as they say they are, if they're as chosen as they say they are, which is very, very contentious, and I have my opinions about that because conflating is retarded, but I digress. Um, Look, you stand on your own then. We don't need to support you. If you feel justified, let the world judge you in the way that you do things, and you stand on your own as a man and be judged by the rest of the world. And if you can't handle that heat, then look, that's not my problem. I'm an American. I care about America. I care about what happens here. I don't care about Israel. I don't care about their military endeavors. I don't care about any of that garbage. At some point, these people have to stand on their own and nut up or shut up, because this whole little situation of getting away with being able to attack whoever it is that they want and running their mouth and being able to do this and do that. I mean, at what point do you get to, do you stand on your own after attacking somebody and reaping what you sow? It's not an American interest. It's not America's position. It's antithetical to everything it is that we are. Because if we're going to sit here and talk about America first, if we're going to talk about MAGA, if we're going to be for the American people, that doesn't include the Israelis. And it sure as hell doesn't include the Ukrainians. Whatever anybody's opinions are on that, whether you're for or against, in the end of the day, I don't care. Like, you need to say, it's the same thing with the Ukrainians too. They can learn to fight on their own. They don't need us. If you're going to run your mouth and start these conflicts, do it yourself. Like, if you think you're that capable, like that's it drives me up the wall at this point that we have these sycophants in Congress that not only want to continue to support these people, but then it's the exact same thing with Ukraine. There's this back and forth of like, oh, well, Israel needs our help, but they're so strong. They're so strong. They're so strong. And it's Israel themselves has come out and said, we are at one point they had a Freudian slip of like, oh, well, we're the strongest military in the world. And it's like, okay, well, if that's the case, fight your own wars. Do you think you're so capable? The same thing with the Ukraine situation, which is, they're so capable, but yet they can't fight their own wars. And then you have the whole conversation of Russia's not that strong, but apparently they're going to take over the entire world. It's like, well, I freaking pick one, dude,
It's ridiculous. People should care. We should be caring about what's happening here.
Right.
I went and checked, and my congressperson, Lisa McClain, yes, I'm talking to you, she was celebrating. He was like, "Oh yeah, great,
Yeah.
Trump's a great person." I'm like,
Right.
"This is horrible. What are you talking about?" There's
Yeah.
a guy who's running, multiple people running for governor.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Nesbitt straight up was celebrating, posting American flag pictures and pictures of like, oh, I'm praying and like, oh yeah, America's great, and it's just like it's like Team America stuff. Like we're gonna go
That's just
take over
trash,
the
dude.
world. It's like, dude, you want to be governor of
Yeah.
Michigan? Why are you sitting here talking about that stuff?
Yeah.
And then one of the last people who tried to run for governor of Michigan, she posted and said, "Oh, look who's dancing in the streets now, bitch." About like I'm not even joking. I can look it up. She straight up said, "Look who's dancing in the streets now, bitch." At
Good
Rashida
Lord.
Tlaib, because Tlaib is I think she's Palestinian, but
Yeah,
she's from the
something.
Muslim area of Michigan.
Yeah.
And so they're straight up celebrating. They're like, "Oh yeah, we're dancing, we're having a grand time, we're so happy America's like going to war." And then they're like, and some people may die. And all you think about is you think about Shrek and the
Yeah.
guy, the prince, who's like, "Oh, it's a
Lord Farquaad.
this yeah, it's a this is a sacrifice I'm willing to
Yeah.
take. Some of you may die, and I'm like, you guys, this is insane. This is insane.
Yeah.
Oh, God bless our troops. Oh, okay. What are you doing? Oh God, please bless our troops who the last act of their lives might potentially be murdering someone, because this is completely wrong. And and thou shalt not murder is a commandment. Like, this is ridiculous.
Man, it just like there's so much like it's there's a lot that like there's so much that could be covered here, but the reality of it is like unfortunately we have to allow some time for this whole situation to breathe, because I've gone through so many different pieces of information, so many different articles, so many different goings on and happening, whether it's Khomeini, whether it's the IRGC, two of their commanders, or events that happened with U.S. bases. Like there's such an information overload right now that it's going to take time also to sift through a bunch of this. But I think in the end of the day, I think it's safe to say that there's no rationale whatsoever that we ever should have engaged in this. We never should have been party to it. And every single time that there's anything that goes on in the Middle East, every single time, there's always these visits from like Bibi. There's always some type of person that's coming from Israel, and then it's like after that happens, then it's like all of a sudden the whole thing just flips over. We talk about doing these negotiations, and then it just all goes spiraling down the toilet, so to speak. And whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, or the 7 countries in 5 years memo, whatever it is that you want to talk about, why is it? And look, this is even an Epstein thing too. You look at all of the conversations there, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Ukraine, because they certainly talked about, Ukraine. They tried to get into Moscow, and they wanted to try and drag Putin into all that kind of stuff. And when they didn't do it, they're like, well, maybe the Ukraine thing, maybe we can make this work. And they were talking about what eventually would have been the Maidan, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, all of these things, it's for as much as I know that people don't want to like make these connections. I mean, it's a freaking spider web, dude.
Yeah.
And I see that you kind of have some things going there. If you want, I can also bring
I
that
don't.
up.
I don't have. I had something for earlier, but I don't have anything right now. Yeah, I had something earlier, but we've passed that when we were talking about the founders.
Gotcha.
What I will say, you talk about things being a spider web. I think there's a lot of problems with people trying to have this clean definition of why things happen.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who they like to have this unified theory of, you hear about the ZOG, Zionist occupied government.
Mm-hmm.
The Jews are telling us to do everything as Zionists or whatever. I'm not sold on that. I do think that we
Yeah.
have a lot of competing interests. I think we
Absolutely.
got a little glimpse into that when we saw Huckabee and Tucker interview, which,
Oh yeah.
regardless what you think of either of those two people, what happened in that interview? The fact that the ambassador to Israel is, congratulating or talking to a traitor who spent years in prison, who potentially, even though he's a bit wishy-washy, potentially embraced Israel controlling everything from the Nile to the Euphrates.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is a huge piece of territory, bigger than Iran. It encompasses multiple countries.
Massive. It's massive.
It's huge. It's huge. It's basically the whole Middle East. Basically the whole Middle East. So he possibly embraced them, supposedly having that whole thing. These are just ridiculous things. But I see all of this stuff as there's incentives to do things. And so you might have your business incentive that thinks they can maybe do some oil stuff. You have your MIC incentive, which I think is actually a lot bigger than a lot of people think about.
Oh, absolutely.
I think the MIC is a huge, huge problem, because
especially
I think
when
that's
you pull Palantir and BlackRock into that picture.
That too. I mean, just to put it on perspective, I'm in the manufacturing industry, and I could potentially have small defense contracts where I'm making like a little widget. I'm making a little I don't know, a little bracket for a tank or something like that. Nothing special, but it keeps me in business. I can't tell you how many people that's what they do. Yeah. There's so many people out there that they have like one little military part they make for some tank, missile. Who knows? They may not even know what it is. But they make this little part, and they have no interest in the military. They want the military to use the stuff because they want to keep making this part.
Yeah.
And there are people who have been doing this stuff for 30 years. They just make one little part and they're happy. And so I talk to people all around me that I know, and they all dabble in the military stuff. All of them. They have
I knew a gunsmith that did contracts a while back, and they they don't do it anymore. But it's in the end of the day, I think I do think that there's I do think that there is a moral question that people kind of have to ask themselves. And and I do understand why people go either way. I'll just say that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and
it's really hard to make a living. When you're trying to compete against making a widget in China, the U.S. military U.S. military says, I won't buy widgets from China. Yeah. And so the question is, do you lose your business? Do you lose your livelihood? Or instead of making a widget for regular people, do you make the widget for the MIC? Because the widget for the MIC, that's never going away, because they always buy from us. And I know so many people that's what they do. They have, they might not make it. They're not making a fortune. We're talking like they're just paying their bills, but it's a big incentive. So I see a lot of this stuff as incentives. There's incentives from all different directions that are pushing everybody to do what they're doing. I don't think there's any of this unified theory of like the Israel runs everything, that Trump actually bows down to Netanyahu. I don't think any of that's true. I think it's all incentive. And in the Middle East, there's incentive too. As I said, Pakistan was complaining about Iran.
Yeah.
Pakistan is complaining about Iran. Other countries in the area, Saudi Arabia, they complain about Iran. So there's incentives from everybody in the area. They're sick of the Iranians.
100%.
And whether they're justified or not, they are. And like, for example, like Turkey, that area of the Middle East has always been under control of basically two major factions, with Europe kind of getting involved here and there, kind of through the Mediterranean area. So I guess you could say there's three factions. You've always had like a strong Persian, which is Iran. Then you've always had a strong Turkey influence. Then you've always had a strong Mediterranean. When I say Mediterranean, you start to get your Europe involved in there. So like that includes like the Greeks, so that could include, you know, the Romans, or that can include like the British, because they're all coming from the sea. That's all the ocean, you know, in the Suez Canal. But there always has been a conflict between all three of those groups, and it's gonna it's gonna keep going. It's been going on for thousands of years. The one guy who said, "Oh, Persia first attacked Athens," well, he's right in one respect. These groups have been fighting since that point in time, and they still are. And I don't see how it's helpful for us to get involved, but all of the incentives are pushing that way. But I don't really know if there's much more to talk about Iran. I mean, it's
no, it's I do think
I'm pretty much done.
You know, I do think it's what it's going to come down to is we're going to have to give it some time to kind of let it cook. Like I said, there's so much information out there right now, and it seems like it's evolving time and time and again. But I mean, this was not, you know, and I told you earlier, I had some articles that I wanted to bring up, but it's like everything's kind of been said that is already being said. You know, we're seeing military bases get struck. We're seeing this whole thing evolve. We're waiting, you know, we're essentially waiting to see if there's veracity to the Khomeini claims. We're waiting to see what the damage is. I mean, and the other portion of that too is, you know, you're still seeing, or at least when I last looked, we're still seeing Tel Aviv get hit, you know, so until that dust settles and until we can start to really kind of sift through a bunch of this, there's not too much more other than the fact that I won't back down from this. We should not be fighting wars on behalf of anybody else. They need to fight their own wars. They need to supply themselves. They need to stand on their own, and they need to be able to pay the consequences for the actions that they've taken. And in addition, not putting our people in harm's way, keeping them in military bases that we really don't need and use the excuse of, well, it's for national security. National security, if you're going to make the argument for that, is inside our country. It's securing our nation. It's securing the interests at home, defending our country for the American people. And more like you said, even down to the states. We need to pay attention to the states. We need to pay attention to the border issue. We need to pay attention to a lot of other things like infrastructure and just general welfare, which the whole welfare thing is a whole other can of worms that we'll get into at some point down the road, because that's the welfare clause and commerce clause are highly overwhelmingly misunderstood. But there's a lot there. And I think, you know, obviously I don't want to speak for you, and I'll give you a second here, but it's just not good, man. And I just don't think that this is going to be the type of, I hope, I could be wrong. It could be done within a week. You know, it could be done tomorrow for all I know. But the initiation of this was totally unwarranted. I would say it's definitely unconstitutional. It's illegitimate, and it never should have happened. That's my position on it. I'll give you a couple minutes here to kind of bow tie yours, and then we'll move into some Epstein and gun stuff. So,
all right, yeah, I agree. I think that the actions in Iran are completely unconstitutional. They're also immoral. There's no justification. The justifications that have been presented completely are hypocritical based on our complaints about other people or other countries. And in the end of the day, I really don't care about any of these countries. And to an extent, I don't care about when I say care about countries, I'm specifically talking about like their governments or who runs the country. The parasites that call themselves politicians. I don't care about the US government at all. In fact, I kind of detest it. What I care about is the people. And so just like I think that destruction of the U.S. government, I honestly think that if you were to destroy the United States government, I think that there would be a lot of hurt people, like actual individuals that would be harmed. So I'm not in favor of, like, you know, destroying the U.S. government. I'm
Right.
also typically not in favor of destroying other governments. That doesn't mean I think they're good. It's
No,
just
yeah.
it's awful. Our defense of Ukraine, if you're defending Ukraine from a standpoint of, oh, Ukraine wants to rule themselves, well, yes and no, but what you're doing is you're just hurting people. You're killing people, you're wrecking Ukraine. Their
Hmm.
lives are never going to be the same again. The
No.
same with all the Russians fighting in Ukraine. And
Hmm.
here in Iran, any U.S. soldier that dies, their family's never going to be the same. That soldier's
Right.
obviously never going to be the same. They're dead. And in Iran, those people aren't going to be the same either. I'm not
Hmm.
saying it's good to live in Iran,
Right.
but it's way better than dying. And we can look at all the things we've been involved in my whole life. I'm sure Saddam Hussein would have, put me in jail in an instant.
Sure.
But I think I would rather walk through the streets of Baghdad during Saddam Hussein's time than today, as me.
Hmm.
And so I don't think it's any safer or any better for us or for the people that live there. I think it's the same in Iraq. It's definitely the same in Libya, and right now in Syria, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's the people. It's not the governments, not these parasites that call themselves politicians. It's I don't know. I just see a lot of people getting
Yeah.
hurt and not a lot of good coming from it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a fair assessment. That it's. I think there's a point where you can recognize that not everybody is inherently bad. And I will say one of the most enlightening things in perhaps a very sad way that I've seen, especially with the Ukrainian and Russian conflict, is you have people that like it's not even just I understand disliking a particular government, and I do agree with you. Like you can absolutely have just a distaste, a disdain, dislike for a government, what they're doing to their own people, um, or just a simple disagreement of policy, right? Um, and I think you can also disagree with having a militaristic intervention, as it is something that also violates our principles and our foundation and our tenets and our values and our morals. But there is this one of the things that I saw when the larger escalation of between Russia and Ukraine really escalated, and it made me sick. It made me absolutely sick to my stomach. Was there was a it was over in Crimea on the bridge in Crimea, and I'll never forget this. Uh, you know, I was scrolling through and I was looking at headlines, and there was a picture of the bridge being hit because it had been struck several times over the course. But there was a car with two parents, two Russian parents and their child, and both the parents were killed, and the child was ejected through the front windshield of the car. And I'll never forget the inhumanity that I saw in that post where, people were saying, well, the child's better off without the parents. The child should have died with the parents. We don't care about Russians. We don't care about these people. They should all be erased from the earth. And you still see some of this rhetoric today. And it's just like, dude, like that, the depravity, regardless of where you come down on things, the absolute depravity and depths that you have to go to even in my mind, just to write something like that and then just be
Yeah.
like, no, I'm going to hit the send button on this. It doesn't matter. Like, and that's coming from places that are considered to be Western societies. If that's Western
Mhm.
societies, dude, that is so freaking degenerate and just
Well,
vile that it's like,
well,
and
even
I'll never
today,
forget that, dude. Like,
yeah, I agree. I've seen so much of that stuff today. Like just the one lady who she ran for governor in Michigan who said,
yeah,
"Who's dancing in the streets now?" It's like you're celebrating people dying. That's horrific. But then I also saw people we're part of the American Liberty Caucus. were associated with Libertarian Party, and I saw people who were, or at least once were, prominent libertarians who are saying, "Oh man, this is going to make life hard in the midterms." What is that?
Yeah.
Who cares about the elections when we're talking about people dying and you're worried about like the midterms? Which, by the way, I hate to break it to you, libertarians aren't winning a libertarian majority anytime soon in the midterms, so shouldn't be a priority to you. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy how inhumane people are sometimes.
It's vile, and you know, and I guess, well, I mean, this is actually, I guess, a perfect segue to the Epstein thing, and you know, I mean, you look at that level of inhumanity, and you know, I guess, where does it come from? Where does it originate? How deep does it go? You know, and I was having a thought yesterday, and I, you know, because you scroll YouTube as you do, and you always see like these independent organizations like 561 PC. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's a pred catcher YouTube channel. And
I heard about one that's on like Roadblocks, like there's like a video game.
There's
and he's like going around trying to catch like groomers on Roadblocks.
There's that. I mean, obviously Alex Rosen and like his crew, like they're a pretty prominent name. But the point is
some of that stuff gets really sketchy.
And look, like I'm here to tell you, it is interesting to me though how when you watch some of these videos and you see like how many of these people that they find, you know, like how many of these people are out there, and they're finding more people, Charles, than the U.S. government is willing to even admit is in and around Epstein. It's like, you know what? I'm starting to think.
Oh yeah.
I'm starting to think that maybe these people should do the investigation.
Well, I do get a little nervous about due process, but what I will say is, you know, as far as things go, I have, you know, come in contact with people who are, you know, they've been predatory to children or different things of that nature. And like at first, maybe you don't know it. Like there was a guy who I knew him for years and years.
Some of them are
not personally. I just knew him at like work. You know, it's just a guy at work. And all of a sudden one day he wasn't at work anymore, and they're like, "What happened?" He goes, "Oh, this guy was coaching a softball team, and he did like the softball leagues and stuff with like adults, but then he also did a child's league." And he would have all the children over, and I don't know exactly what he's doing, but he's in jail for a reason. But when you talk about like dealing with the problem better than the government does, there was a guy I used to work with, and this guy who was a bit, you know, wasn't the best guy in the world. It was found out that he had gotten arrested. Which had happened. He would get drunk or do stupid shit and get in fights and stuff and get arrested. Anyway, it was found out that there was an allegation that, and I don't know if he had actually been arrested at this point, but he had thrown a baby. Thrown it. Like the baby was in the hospital. Like in the hospital. Like he was angry and he's like, "Shut up," and threw it. You know, just something you just don't do. And I have, and then this will put a little bit of you know, it's not a happy situation, but what happened was, it was amazing. People walked into work that day, and it got around right away. And I've seen people mad at their boss before, and we're talking a company that has a couple hundred employees. The line out of HR was out the door. And everyone was like, "Look, it is that guy never comes to work again, and we never seen him ever again, ever, or we will, or something will happen to him." And there was references that things would happen to him if he ever came to work. and or this plant won't run. Like they shut a plant, like a plant, literally, they were going to shut a plant down if he showed up. They demanded, the people that worked there, hundreds of people got together and they demanded. They said, "We will shut your plant down. This factory will not make parts if this guy comes to work. We don't care. He is such a bad person. We will not associate with him." And I'm going to say, never saw the guy ever again. Never.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think he got in some serious trouble. I'm pretty sure he's in jail at this point for quite a while. But, I mean, if he had walked around town, there was something would have happened to him as well. And so,
for sure. Yeah.
You know, I'm not into vigilante justice or anything like that, but there are, you know, I do think there's a lot of good people out there who, you know, when things happen, they will step up. And, you know, sometimes officials, they need to know that, hey, there's going to be some angry people unless you deal with these problems.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, I really just don't see Epstein as being any different. You know, people, I think this has really kind of galvanized a pretty significant demographic of the population to where they're like, dude, like, you're not going to just walk, you're not going to just walk away from this one. Like, and I think what's really pissing a lot of people off about this, honestly, Charles, is you every so often they continue to say like, oh, let's just go beyond it. Like, no, there's no going beyond this, my dude. Like, we don't even know how many of these people there are. We also don't know how many victims in particular. Like, it's simply because you have an accounting of a certain level of people or a certain number of people and a certain number of victims. This thing has gotten so big between, you know, Epstein, Maxwell, you know, and their significant others or whatever the case is, or, you know, or their family lineage. And then you go beyond there and you look into the UK, you look into the US government, you look at all of these different places, right? And somebody brought up a while ago, whatever happened to all of those children in the detention centers down by the border? Where did all of them go? You know, and so it's like, I think, and I could be wrong, and I look, I hope and pray that I am wrong about this, but that was a lot of children, Charles. That was a lot of children. And there was a ton of coverage about it, and then there was no coverage about it, and then somehow all of them were gone. Where did they go? Where did these children go? Because it's not just American children. It's not just, you know, children that were convenient to the whatever location they were at the time. We're also talking a massive amount of children that have been gone, missing, disappeared on the southern border, the northern border, whatever the case is. Like, it's an alarming amount. And that's not even counting, you know, there was a time, and I don't know if I think it's still the case, but Ukraine was one of the biggest trafficking hubs in the world for women and children. What happened to all of those people? You know, so the idea that you have an administration that's sitting here just like, oh, let's go beyond this. Let's just get past it. You know, we've got so many things to do. You know how Trump is just like, oh, we've got to do big things. Okay. It's like, no, dude, like, you're not getting a free of all the things. I can detest the war with Iran. I can detest our alliances. I can detest all of these things. And to some degree, those are always conversations we can come back to. I don't want to have to come back to this conversation. I want to finish this conversation. And the people, even if they weren't directly complicit, if you are covering up for this, or you're avoiding this, or whatever the case is, you should stand trial and face the music, because this is one of those things that is so reprehensible, in my opinion, that it should not be avoided.
Well, that's one of the problems, though, that I'm really nervous about with all this Epstein stuff. And, you know, I personally like Thomas Massey a lot for a politician in Congress. I think he's
sure, yeah,
he's best
sure.
I am really nervous about some of the information that he's gotten released. There's a couple reasons.
Yeah.
So my wife, she showed me a picture of what looked like a girl that was looked like she was showing some stuff, and there was black bars and stuff. You couldn't really see.
Right. Yep.
And she's like, "This is horrible. This is horrific. Oh my gosh, all these evil people. Blah 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 blah." I'm like, "That's awful." A couple days later, I find out that picture is directly out of like some '90s like porno movie, like commercially available. You can buy it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So the information that's released, they literally mixed it like a porn collection with all the
They're
documents.
obfuscating. That's what they're doing.
Oh yeah, and they're also selectively redacting. So all these like these we figured it out, these accidental redactions that they can unredact.
Yes.
I'm to the point where I think it was intentional.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that they're perfectly okay with their unredacted.
Of course. Yeah.
They're trying to make it so messy, and they're trying to make us so angry in general. They're trying to get a hysteria across the country. They're trying to make us angry. They want us to want blood. And they want to get it to the point where, like, if someone was, I don't know, let's just, if Joe is in the files and they bring him up on charges, they're never going to find an unbiased jury. We're never going to have a fair trial. Never. Like, that's the same problem with the guy who killed George Floyd, Chauvin, who killed George Floyd.
Yep.
I don't think it was possible to have a fair trial at that time of that guy.
No.
Do I think he should have been a policeman ever again? No. Do I think he murdered someone? Yeah, most likely. Am I super, like, upset and want something done about it? Yeah. But the problem is that I don't understand how you could have even possibly had a fair trial for that guy.
Sure. Yep.
And it's happened over and over and over again. And it's better. And the sounds, people get all angry. They're like, "Oh, we got to hold people accountable." But at the end of the day, it's better to let a guilty man free than it is to put innocent people in jail.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that we're like people whose names are brought up who had nothing to do with anything. And there's been multiple people.
You mean Elvis wasn't involved, Charles? You mean Elvis Presley wasn't involved? No.
Yeah. Yeah. Or what was it? Who was it? Was it Michael Jackson? It was some like singer who they had like the kids next to him like blacked out. I don't know who it was exactly. But there's a picture with Epstein, another guy, and then kids blurred out, and then a woman blurred out.
Right.
The kids and the lady were the guy's wife and children.
Yeah.
Like, wait a second. He happens to be in a picture with his wife and children.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, domestic abuse is a thing, if that's what you're alleging.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, to just be in proximity to your wife and children who are now blacked out by squares, that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. But everyone jumped on it. They're like, "This is an evil person. This is a bad person," and now he has to beat the rap. And I've just seen over my lifetime, I've just seen too many of these like hyped up things where we're supposed to be outraged or go after people. I mean, I remember in college when Obama said, Obama's kids were getting old enough that they're going to be in high school or college. And Obama used, I think it was Title IX technically. And he said that, schools have an obligation to deal with sexual harassment, even if there's no like police report or anything. I'm going to tell you, I went to a school with a bunch of dudes. There was not very many women.
Right.
And it became such, I mean, if you were worried about there being like only dudes, we straight up had events we called man days because we didn't want women around. Because we were afraid if women were around, we would get in trouble and expelled from college.
Yeah.
We straight up were like, we're just going to have a man weekend. No women allowed. Because there was just like this allegation stuff going around.
Sure.
There's no proof. And you just happen to be around.
Well,
someone would get upset. And that's the sort of thing I'm seeing. It's happening all over again. And I guarantee there's a lot of evil people, but it's so mixed up. We're never going to get a fair trial.
Yeah, and I think and you hit on something that I think is I do think is very prevalent, which we have an outrage culture. Everything is outrageous. We've got to bring attention. Which, look, don't get me wrong, attention is good. Attention does bring eyes to the issue. It does bring, but in saying that at the same time, and I don't disagree with you on this, there often becomes, and you saw it a lot with like the Me Too movement, right? Which you had this outrage. Yeah. Every man was a sexual offender. It seemed like every interaction, and a lot of people want to know, like, like why aren't people dating? Because there's data on that right now, to where it's like you're looking at the interactions between men and women. It's like, well, I don't know. 10 years of Me Too kind of, screwed a lot of things up for people, to where I think you have a situation where you still have segments of society that don't want to be involved, or they don't want to interact because we have so deeply rooted, even if people know that that's not what they're doing, it's still this idea of just like, I could have what I think is a great date with somebody, and they could turn around, there's a paranoia. And,
well, have you ever, do you like John Wayne?
I mean, movies, John Wayne movies? I have seen quite a few John Wayne movies growing up.
John Wayne movies? Okay. There's a John Wayne movie called The Quiet Man about Ireland. And he sees this lady who he likes. He likes this lady.
Yeah.
Like, what do they expect us to do? Date like they did in The Quiet Man, where literally they have a guy who drives a little horse and buggy, and there's a seat on one side of the buggy, and there's a seat on the other side of the buggy. Mm-hmm. And the guy sits on one side, the girl sits on the other side, and then the driver drives and makes sure that they don't canoodle or do anything on the drive. Like, is that the level of interaction we want? Like, that's
right. Well,
that's ridiculous.
It's so antithetical to the human condition also. It's like, like you said, there's going to be bad people out there. There's going to be people that want to do nefarious and criminal and just downright degenerate things. Yeah. But, much like, the idea of like, oh, there's enemies everywhere, so we have to start these wars and do all these different things, right? Like, it's like, at what point do you just accept the fact that there are inherent risks with life itself? And so you go forth and you still take these risks. And look, again, there's probably a lot of people, as it pertains to Epstein, right, that very much are either culpable, directly involved, whatever the case is, like some real degenerate people. And I have no doubt about that. And more than anything, I want to see justice done, not so much for me, but for the people who have been wronged that may or may not even still be here, right? And I do think that there is a culpability in addition with people who want to run cover, but we have to be careful. People just need to
stop associating with them, right? Like, for example, Bill Gates, all right? We didn't need the Epstein files to know that Bill Gates was a bad guy.
He did not have sexual relations with that woman, but
but Bill Gates made his billions being an IP terrorist. Yeah. He was an IP terrorist. That's intellectual property. It's fake and gay. No, bad IP is dumb. Okay? He's an IP terrorist. That's how he made his billions of dollars, by threatening people with IP and stealing people's stuff and litigation and stuff. I mean, most recently, I think one of the Rothschilds lost a court case to the guy who owns like Valve or Steam or something like that, because the Rothschild was stealing IP or not stealing IP. He was basically using IP law to, make sure people couldn't do anything and then steal all their money and stuff. It's a scam. That's how Bill Gates made his money. He let people invent things, patent it, and then wouldn't let other people compete. That's basically what he did, is IP terrorism. We knew he was someone like that, and just an asshole kind of guy. We knew that since since I don't know, the 80s or the 90s. We've known that forever.
Yeah.
We didn't need to know he was associated with Epstein. The only reason he started his foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, was to launder his name and make him look like a good guy again. And also to get all of his money into an area where if he got divorced, she couldn't take half of it. That's the only reason for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to jip his wife out of a divorce, and to also, you know, launder his name and make him look like a good guy again. And then he shows up during COVID and is an evil person again during COVID. Surprise, surprise. The evil guy from the 90s comes back and is evil in the 2000s. He comes back and is evil in the 2020s. He's the bad person. We don't need to know about the Epstein files and know this is a bad guy.
Are you saying patterns?
Don't associate with him.
Are you saying patterns are kind of relevant, Charles?
Yeah, it's kind of obvious. Yeah, it's kind of obvious.
Well, so
just like Epstein has been, he's been operating since the 80s.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
There's nothing new. He had you know, we don't move in those circles. At least I've never been to an Epstein party.
I've never been to one either, so.
Never been. But that's not because, like, I decided not to. It's because I never could, because I don't run in those circles. But in those circles, he was known for a long time for being a sketchy guy.
Yeah.
He had convictions.
Yeah.
For relations with underage children.
Well,
he was known even before the most recent things that occurred.
Yeah. And I think to some degree that also made him very usable by people within the intelligence community and a variety of other actors and in state, you know, oriented individuals. And I think there's kind of that double-edged sword there, to where, like, they had dirt on him, but at the same time he had dirt on them. So it was kind of this weird balancing act, to where it's just like, I know what you did last summer. And they're like, yeah, but we also know what you did last summer because you ran a lot of guns for us last summer, whatever the case is. You know, it's just like, so.
Yeah. Now, I will say, in regards to the Epstein stuff, there are a lot of allegations.
Yes.
And the information we have is incomplete. It's redacted in certain ways. It's manipulated. It's tainted. So we don't really know what happened. I'm having a real hard time finding. There's a lot of there, or a lot of smoke.
Yeah.
So I anticipate there's a lot of fire, but I'm having a real hard time finding actual evidence of things. And that's a little unnerving, because there's a lot of allegations, or there's a lot of let's go after people, let's do things, but I'm seeing a lack of evidence.
Right.
And when I mean evidence, it's like provable evidence, and then a due process thing. I get really nervous when I see that kind of stuff. And also the passage of the release of the Epstein files ended up being so bipartisan that anything that is that bipartisan has always been bad in the end. So I'm a little scared, like a little unnerved about that.
You know,
so I don't really understand how to, like, really take a lot of that stuff. And I think that, like I said earlier with the foreign policy stuff, that there's a lot of incentives. I think here too there's a lot of incentives. I think there's a lot less like straight up blackmail, and there's a lot more incentives. So you know, I don't need to have pictures of you, you know, with a child, which is absolutely disgusting and evil to think about. I hope it never happened. I don't wish any of this stuff to be real, because if you wish that this stuff is real, that's disgusting as well. That's on you a little bit.
Very depraved.
I hope none of it's real. But it's not that I need a picture of you with a child. I just need a picture of you in a compromised position with a woman who's not your wife. And now your wife's going to be asking you questions.
Yeah.
And that might be inconvenient. Or maybe we had a good time doing nothing illegal. We just golfed on the golf course, and we're pals. And so the incentive is to hang out and do stuff with your pal.
Right.
So I think there's a lot less straight up blackmail, like you did something with an underage person, so do what I want or you're going to jail. Because at the end of the day, people that blackmail other people, they tend to, I mean, Epstein did die, but they tend to get off pretty quickly.
Sure.
They don't tend to survive. Like, if you're running around blackmailing, mobsters will bump you off.
Yeah.
And the type of person he's potentially, blackmailing, they're all mobsters. I think a lot of it is that to get in the club of people, to be trusted, you have to be involved in these things, some of which may be illegal and horrific, but some of them are just simple trust exercises.
Right.
Like, I'm going to tell you that, I don't know, I'm going to say, George Bush liked to murder people, and I'm going to see if you tell anybody. If you tell Bill Clinton that George Bush likes to murder people, I know not to trust you.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not saying any of that's true, but it just means you can't trust them. So I think a lot of it is more about trust and this networking and incentives, and a lot less about straight up like black.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess as kind of a segue into some firearm stuff here, to kind of bow tie a bunch of this, I feel like we've talked about a lot already, but I just I have to ask the question, are these also the type of people that you implicitly want to trust when they're like, look, Charles, nobody needs a weapon of war and a standard magazine, or as they like to call it, a high capacity magazine. You don't need that because we're here to help you. And, we're going to make sure that you're safe. Are these even at best, right? Even if it's not, even if somebody's not just a crazy degenerate pile of garbage, but they're just a liar, which is, for me, is right up there with that anyways, right? But it's are these the people that you absolutely want to just be like, you know what? They might have a point there, Charles. Maybe we don't need all this stuff. And it's weird because in Minnesota, so I don't know what the disconnect is here. They just had they tried to ram through a semi-auto ban. They tried to ram through a magazine thing, which, mind you, to everybody listening, especially my Minnesota viewers, there's still going to be a potential for them to do this. I fully expect them to do this again. But from everything that I saw with Gun Owners Caucus, or the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, it was 10-10. It had no forward momentum. I've seen some people say oh, it passed. I guess my opinion is going to go with the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. And the reason I say that is because they were actually there. And if they said it didn't pass and that was the final motion because they didn't have enough muster, then I'm going to go with them. And I've not seen them correct that statement either. So that's what I'm going to go with. But regardless, you have one of the comments that a lot of people said too is these same Democrats in Minnesota were just weeks ago talking about how Alex Preddy should have had his firearm. It's okay, but you do realize that firearm had somewhere between a 15 to 17 round magazine and had an optic, and is exactly one of those firearms that you guys are now saying that you want to ban in conjunction with the magazine. So which one is it? And I will say that the Minnesota Democrats, the hypocrisy is insane, but also the Republicans don't help themselves much either. On the plus side, we did have enough Republicans here to stop these things, at least for the moment, from moving forward. But I mean, the way I've kind of concocted this, or the way I've kind of understood this is, look, if somebody wants to take your ability to own the proper implement of defense, which, look, all weapons are potentially a weapon of war, right? That's just the reality of it. we have the right to defend ourselves with the best ability and the best means necessary and are available to us, whatever that is. If somebody tries to tell you that you can't own these things, these people are not only not your friends, but at some point, I think it goes without saying that there is a high likelihood that they mean to do something that would piss you off or hurt you or aggress you in a way that would require you to defend yourself. And, because when you look at some of the things that they talk about and you look at the policies that are outside of the gun issue in and of themselves, they're highly destructive policies, whether it's giving a slap on the wrist to a 4-time murderer, whether it's giving a slap on the wrist to a thief that has used a weapon, or a slap on the wrist to, people, again, like people who are more like, what is described in the Epstein, but yet the average person trying to defend themselves from these individuals, which, mind you, the Second Amendment is about defending yourself against out of control authoritarian tyranny. But I digress. Like, we have the right to defend ourselves from all of these people. And it just really does not, it's no good. And I don't think people can trust these people. There's no government that will ever protect you in the way that you can protect you if you go and get the training and you go and get the proper implements. But man, where are we at? Because I last I checked, I think there's over half the states in the country have constitutional carry, I believe. It's close to that, I think. I don't remember the exact number, but do you see this continuing to progress in a positive way? And how should people look at this situation, dude?
Well, I'm not 100% sure how each individual state's going to handle it. I do think overall, countrywide, constitutional carry, which I think is redundant, but doesn't matter. I think constitutional carry is going to be more and more prevalent in more and more states. That's what it seems to be doing. I think Ohio has constitutional carry, or it has permitless carry. I can't remember. Like, there is a difference, but I think they have constitutional carry, and their crime in parts of the state have gone down. They haven't seen an increase in crime with constitutional carry, and I think the same thing would happen in Michigan. I live in the town of Oxford, and in our town we had a high schooler who shot up the high school, and 3 students died. It was horrific. It was awful. It wrecked the community. One of the students, actually, the only reason he died, he was an all-star athlete football player. He died because he heard the gunshots going off, and he ran at the shooter and tried to tackle the shooter, and the shooter hit him as he was trying to tackle him. And supposedly, when they had him in the ambulance or the cop car, and they were trying to get him, keep him from dying, he said, "I tried, I failed, I'm sorry." Like, he apologized for not succeeding in stopping the shooter. Anyway, it was horrific. It was horrible. And at the end of the day, they did this commission to try and say, "Oh, we're going to find, all the things we could have done to prevent this problem from occurring." And so one of the things they said was, "Well, we're going to have, age requirements, so we're going to have different things." It's like, well, changing the age to buy a handgun from 18 to 21 or whatever you want to say, it doesn't matter, because the kid was in high school. He wasn't even of age. This is ridiculous. I saw the list of changes they wanted to make, and not one of the changes that were anti-2A would have prevented the shooting in any way.
Of course, yeah, exactly.
All they would have done was get in the way of people in general. So they're not actually trying to fix anything or solve any problems. They're just throwing laws out there that are just making felons.
Mm-hmm.
They're just making felons, just
And they'll
straight up
surf on the
creating.
coffins of the dead in order to try and do it.
Yeah, yeah. So, for example, the state chair for Michigan for the Libertarian Party,
Right.
he's a felon. He served his time in jail.
Right.
What was it for? It was for lying on a gun form. Because there was a claim by the government that he was smoking weed and bought a gun. The only evidence, to my knowledge, that they had was he had posted that, you know, weed's pretty good on Facebook once. And he also owned guns. So they assumed that he smoked weed because he said weed is good or something like that on Facebook. Right. No evidence that he was actually smoking weed.
Mm-hmm.
No evidence. They didn't find any weed on him when they searched his house. None of that stuff. They just assumed because of a Facebook post. And they put him in jail for 10 months. They made him a felon because of that. But what were they really doing? Well, he was one of the Boogaloo boys who walked through the state capitol during COVID. That's what they did. That's what they wanted to go for. They went after him just like they went after other people in Michigan. Mm-hmm. Just like they went after the Whitmer kidnapping, which is the governor, who they claimed the governor was being kidnapped by a bunch of two-way radical, crazy militiamen, which was not true at all. There were more FBI feds involved in kidnapping the government than there were people involved. And, and in fact, one of them, the one that they had to get, like there's a certain charge in regards to crossing counties or traveling to spy on someone.
Sure.
The FBI had to take a guy and said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna go grab something. You want to come with us? We're gonna go grab something, and then we'll go hang out here and we'll do this and that." And he goes, "Sure." And he rode with the FBI guy. The FBI guy literally drove him. And then that was the claim that, oh yeah, he was spying on the governor and trying to kidnap her, because the FBI literally drove him past the governor's mansion.
Right.
In Michigan. He had no intention of being there, of going there. The FBI completely did it. And then they come up with all these gun laws based on these either fictitious issues,
right, or
real problems, real tragedies that are horrific. They weaponize. And then they also, when a horrific issue occurs, they also completely, we were just talking about the Epstein files and how I don't think you can have a fair trial.
Sure.
Right now, there's allegations that the prosecutor did not follow the proper procedure, whatever that is. But basically, the prosecutor wanted to have a conviction so bad that they broke the rules to try and put the kid who shot up the high school in jail and the kid's parents.
Why does that not surprise me?
Because and the kid definitely did it. Okay, the kid definitely did it, and the parents definitely did bad. The kid definitely killed people. It's horrific, and the parents definitely did a bad job at being parents. But the prosecutor wanted a prosecution so bad to put a feather in her cap for promotion or whatever it is, political reason, that she broke the rules. And now it's coming out. And it's potential that the kid or the parents, their trials could completely be like mistrials and them dismissed and them let go. No justice served. We're going to open the wounds out we're going to open the community wounds again. No one's going to get resolution. It's going to just start it all over again.
Yep.
And then all their fixes, none of their fixes want to solve any of the problems. They just want to put innocent people in jail. And I don't understand any of that as far as from Michigan perspective goes.
Yeah, I mean, you know as well as I do, we could probably go through the long list of talking points, I guess, that have accrued. I mean, and to be fair, the government kind of does it to themselves. They because when you look at a lot of the talking points, it's like, oh well, if they're trying to take your guns, they hate you. It's like, yeah, it's, I mean, to be honest, probably true. Yeah, I mean, there are some pretty malicious people out there, no doubt. And if it's not taking that, it's weaponizing the justice system, or it's trying to make up a law to justify X, Y, and Z. But I think it, there needs to be an examination also where when we look at the gun issue, it's easy to cite the Second Amendment. It's easy to talk about this. It's easy to talk about that. But, we have to almost get to a point to where we're a little bit more crafty now, because every time that we start to go forward and we talk about that, like, they don't care. Like, they don't care about it. And I think that's one of those things that we have to come around to is like, they don't care about what the Constitution says. They don't care about the state constitutions. Like you said, they're out there to put a name on their chart as a victory. Like, you are their defining point in their career, if you will, right? And so I think one of the things that, if we want to really preserve, if we want to preserve liberty and we want to preserve rights, there's a couple things, and you do kind of see it existing. One, we need to have more independent, like firms, and you've seen a few of these come out, but, like attorneys on retainer and stuff like that, they come specifically to the aid of people who defend themselves, whatever the case is. We need a lot more
some of
that.
These groups that, even though you got to be careful of these groups, but some of these lawyer groups, I can't think of a name of one right now, but
USCCA was under a lot of hot press for a long time.
Yeah, there are a lot of groups that they're promoted by Palmetto State Armory or other
right.
And smaller gun stores where basically they were, you pay for an insurance policy.
Yep.
To kind of get defended. Now, one of the problems is that, so if you were involved in a self-defense shooting,
right?
They do have, I think it is in the policy that if you do not agree to a plea deal, they won't help you anymore, and you lose all your money.
Or if you're, I believe
I do think that's one of them.
Or if your case turns into a a criminal case, I think, instead of like a general defense case where you are the person that was defending yourself. If for whatever reason it's looked at as you were the aggressor, there's been things, and I will say there's a guy on YouTube.
The problem with defending yourself with pleading self-defense is you are admitting to a crime. You're trying to justify it. That's one of the problems with, like Kyle Rittenhouse, he had to plead. I'm not going to say he pled guilty, but he had to plead. Oh, you're breaking up a little bit. I think I'm good. But Kyle Rittenhouse, for example, he had to admit fault. Whereas,
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
dude,
you were just.
But before we go any farther, my computer started to lock up pretty hard. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I don't know if it's a technical issue. I don't know if my NSA handler is just not the happy with me. I did call a government faggots today. So I know X didn't like that very much. So I don't know if it's just but continue.
Yeah. Well, if you're calling the government faggots, my brother is the happiest because he thinks the government's just gay. Politics is gay. It's all gay. It's all gay.
Fair enough.
Anyway, yeah. So no, what I'm saying is part of the problem with a lot of those 2A defenses is if you're in self-defense, you have to admit to doing the crime, to that, but then you had to justify it. And so the problem is it becomes a bit difficult. Whereas a lot of those companies, I'm not going to name companies because I don't know specifics, but my understanding is a lot of those companies, if you don't accept a plea deal,
Yeah,
they
you
won't.
have to be you have to be
They
very
won't.
careful.
You have to be very careful, and they won't defend you. So if you
Yes.
don't accept, so typically a plea deal will be like, "Hey, you're not going to go to jail,"
Mm-hmm.
and which is really good. You might have to pay some money, so you also are
Right.
liable possibly for some civil damages to the victim or whoever died.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not. I don't think they're a victim if you're self-defense, but whatever. But you also typically like lose any ability to have guns ever again in your life.
Right. Yeah.
Your 2A rights are gone. Which
Right.
I've heard that about basically if you're involved in a self-defense of any shooting,
Yeah.
you're basically guaranteed to, one, most likely serve a little time in prison,
Right.
and two, you're never, your 2A rights are gone for the rest of your life.
Well, heck, I mean that's even included. Like I believe in some states, if you even get up into like a minor altercation or a dust up with somebody just in fisticuffs,
Yeah.
it gets to a point to where it's like, oh, you're a threat to society. It's like, my dude, have you never been in a fist fight before? Like what are you, a freaking pussy? It's like sometimes guys get upset and you start throwing
Yeah.
fists, and the crazy thing is like,
Yeah.
sometimes it works out to where you finish beating the crap out of each other and you're like, hey man, like, I'm kind of over it now, like, it's not that big of a deal. Let's just go our separate ways, or I'll buy you a beer, or whatever the case is. It's like, no, like,
Well,
that's
the founders dueled.
yeah.
Founders dueled. Come
I mean,
on.
yeah, right.
What's the big deal? Like, I'm not saying we should be shooting each other in the street, but the
Yeah.
founders were fine with duels. Like, was it what, Old Hickory Face? Jackson, the one who got rid of the
Oh,
bank.
yeah,
Jackson.
I know what
Yeah.
you're talking about.
Didn't they like say, oh, he's got to go sailing today in a naval ship? And the
Yeah.
whole plan of the naval ship was to like extract a bullet because he had gotten into like a duel years prior, and then it was causing him problems.
Right.
Where he had actually eaten a bullet.
Right.
It's like,
yeah. It's, man, I just, like, when I look at the 2A issue, and I look at how people interact, like, there's, I think it's safe to say that, look, there are a lot of people that see the average person owning a firearm as really, like, I do feel that some of these people really find them as a threat to their power. And I think that you have a lot of people in government that are like, well, like, if we want to do some of these things, we have to do it to where the population is disarmed and they're compliant and this and that. But, it's like, look, in saying that, I think history teaches us, even if you took away the arms of an entire group of people, where we are also in a time now to where the amount of smuggling that occurs, and the U.S. government knows a little something about arms smuggling, am I right? But it's like, it's one of those things where it's just like, dude, like, people will find a way. They will either make their own, they will smuggle some, they will buy some, they will go to the guy that's sitting behind a Walmart in a freaking white van, right? Like, in the end of the day, like, they will find a way. And historically, people have always found a way. And so, and I remember also reading something regarding laws. And when you look at the way that laws were supposed to be done, and I believe Chris Ann Hall talks about this a fair bit too, but preventative law is, it's not effective. This idea of just like, oh, we're going to prevent this. You can never fully prevent something. The whole purpose of the law is to punish the person who was the aggressor, the offender, the violator, if you will. So if somebody murders somebody, you have a law for murder, right? But if you're going to go out here and say like, oh, we're going to wage a war on criminals, and Trump just talked about, I can't remember what it was, but he's like, oh, we're going to wage a war on it. It's like, dude, like, none of this ever works. All it does is it further invites authoritarian dispositions, and it creates a much larger a room for expanded government overreach, which does not benefit the average person. If anything, it will perpetually erode rights and liberty. And so this idea where you can even have preventative law as it pertains to gun, I not to use their phrase, but in their terms, like gun violence, right? Which to me, violence is violence. It doesn't really matter. But
yeah, well, the gun doesn't do it. It's the person. Yeah.
right. Well, and that's just it. It's like, so if you beat somebody over the head with a gun, is that still gun violence? I don't know. Jury's out on that. It's like, but
yeah.
But the point being is like, you're never gonna, like, they're trying to fix something that will never get fixed. And I do think some people probably, like, in their mind, it's a good intention, but I think there's a lot of people that are just more about, they're more about just control. And that's what ultimately, that's what it comes down to, right? Is they need to be able to restrict, whether it's speech, whether it is the Second Amendment in general, or anything that allows people a certain, well, I shouldn't say allows, but where people have a certain amount of lateral movement, they need to restrict that in order to control the population. And that's where I think a lot of this comes down on. I think it's a massive control mechanism, as it has been historically. And we talked about patterns earlier, and I don't see that changing, honestly.
Yeah, well, like one thing you mentioned earlier, like the law being to, get justice or whatever. Like, I've asked quite a few people, why don't you murder someone? And I mean, I have never had someone straight up just say, I don't murder people because it's illegal.
Right.
And like the fact that someone might say, "Oh, I don't murder people because it's illegal," that's never been a thing that people do. It's
darn, this law stopped me.
It's always like, yeah, I don't murder people because I would feel horrible about it, or I would never murder someone. The law does not stop people from doing the wrong thing. People know if something is wrong, and I'm talking about like things that are really wrong. I'm not talking about, you turn the wrong, you turn left on a no turn left, sign. I'm not talking about stuff like that. I'm not talking about technical like regulation. I'm talking about fundamental things that are wrong. People don't murder people because people don't think that murdering is right. People don't steal because they don't think thievery or theft is correct. I will say the biggest impact on violence and theft is honestly the economy. When the economy goes down, crime goes up. And I'm talking about real crime. I'm not talking about traffic violation. I'm talking about real crime.
Right. Yeah.
Real crime goes up.
We're not talking about road pirates here. Road piracy is its own conversation, though. But
yeah. If a guy has an opportunity to dig a ditch or beat an old woman for her wallet, I'm gonna tell you, 9 times out of 10, even the dumbest dude you ever meet will dig a ditch before beating those old woman for her wallet. And that's just what I've seen. But if there's no ditches to be dug, no work to be done, people get desperate and they do desperate things, which can be criminal, are criminal a lot of times. And the biggest, so I don't know, people commit crime not because it's illegal, but because they don't think it's right. And the law is all about just punishing people once they've done something wrong.
Yeah, man. Wow, this has been it's been quite an episode. I guess kind of looking back, and I'll try and put a bow tie on this here, but when we look at, we're just talking about what is right, what is wrong, etc. I think there's, in all of these conversations, the 3 conversations that we've had, like there is a moral impetus in each one of them. There is an idea of like, you know, and I think it's amazing. There is a realm of like self-restraint, right? You know, to where people are just like, oh, you know, like, I don't know, like, this probably isn't the best thing to do. You know, people might hate me. But look, you know, in the end of the day, I mean, there are times, you know, and I get it. Like, people might make this, there are extenuating circumstances to where like a use of force is it exists, and you have to preserve your life or the life of other people. And you see that from like the most individualistic level, from your like your property, which you yourself are your own form of property. I want people to remember that too. Like, if you do not own yourself, that has its own inherent issues, and you have to be able to defend yourself, in addition to land or a home or whatever the case is. But in the end of the day, there's a moral impetus, there's a willingness to defend certain things, and there's a willingness to defend others. And I think whether it is, you know, well, it's not always cut and dry for a lot of people. People make decisions, people take a side. You know, I don't agree with going and bombing Iran. You have other people that agree with doing that because they see the moral impetus as in, you know, we need to help these people. Now, you know, everybody's going to have a difference of opinion. And I think having a perspective of where people are coming from also helps flesh out these conversations. And we have to kind of at least be open to hearing some of these different perspectives. Now, it's not going to stop me from being like, dude, you're all kind of retarded. Especially when you can't make a coherent argument as to why you need to do this, right? But at the end of the day, um, I do think there's a moral and a values and a principles based, disposition that affects all of these things. And I think there's a perspective in all of these things. And so having the conversations, a willingness to kind of go through and dissect all of these things is important, because we're all going to slightly fall down in a different area on all of these different subjects. Even if you and I agree, even if we agree with some other people, we're going to kind of maybe come to that conclusion slightly different, and especially with people we don't agree with. And so, man, I just I really appreciate having you on tonight, man, and providing some opinions and going through these conversations, because it's a lot. And I think as far as Iran is concerned, we're going to have to see how it continues to shake out, see where it's going to go. We talked about it tonight. I don't agree with it. I think it's reprehensible. I think a lot of the Epstein stuff is extremely reprehensible. And I think that, you know, as it pertains to firearm issues, you know, that has its own prerogatives also. But we have to be willing. We have to be willing to take a breath, step back, and actually analyze a lot of the stuff that's going on. Because I think as much as they're counting on us being fearful, as much as they're counting on us just to comply, they're also counting on us to take whatever it is that's thrown in our way and either accepting it outright or denying it outright. And I think we have to use a little bit of discretion in how we sift through these, not only information, but these different issues. So,
yeah, I think you can tie them all together by saying that, like, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
why is declaring unjustified war wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Why is whatever happened with the Epstein stuff, why is participating in that wrong?
Right.
And why is, you know, violating people's rights wrong as far as like 2A and stuff goes? It's not wrong because there's a law. It's not wrong because of the Constitution. It's not wrong because of any, you know,
Mm-hmm.
thing we've created. It's wrong because we know fundamentally that it's wrong to murder someone. It's wrong to abuse someone. It's wrong to put someone in a cage.
Right.
They haven't done anything to anyone else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you, man. I am one of the few, well, maybe not one of the few people, but I am part of the segment or the demographic of people that, you know, and I've probably mentioned this before, but I'm a hopeful realist. It's so easy to see, it's so easy to see the negative in every single thing, every single time. I mean, we're so exposed to just perpetual slop and media and negativity all the freaking time, to where you start to think it's entirely hopeless. And I do think that is one thing overall that they try to beat out of you, is the fact that there's any hope whatsoever. And I refuse to kind of come over to that conclusion. I think that there is, I think there's some hope. I think we also have to learn to be able to create some of that hope also, but at the same time, it's not hopeless. If you think that you're alone, if you think that you're isolated, if you think you are the only person that feels like there's something wrong, if you feel like you're the only person that seemingly is in a fight by themselves when it comes to a lot of these issues, you know, the fortunate thing that I've found is there's a lot of other people out there like you. And I do believe that it is on purpose in many ways, that when you pull up your algorithm, all you see is negativity. All you see is bad things. And I'm not talking about the occasional thing to where, like, you see the dog videos or whatever, like everybody likes dogs and cats and stuff like that, right? Like, that's a given. But it's like, it is hard for people of like mind to find each other when you go essentially against the popular culture, against the grain, and you really advocate for liberty. That's why I think that the Discord with the American Liberty Caucus and what we all do over there is so important, because when you create an environment in which, it's not just libertarians there. We have people from a variety of different backgrounds and a variety of different perspectives. But when you look at what we're able to do over there and the communication that we have, and you know, we talk about a variety of different things, and you can make that work, like it's amazing. And so I would encourage people, you know, don't give up, don't lose hope. It's not entirely hopeless. You just got to find your people, and sometimes that takes a little looking. And as a matter of fact, a shameless promotion, I will put the American Liberty Caucus down below, so you guys and gals can go check that out and see if it's a good fit for you. You know, if it's a great fit for you, then you know, so go and link into the Discord, which I believe the link is still on the website, if I'm not mistaken. You can fill out the form, and then there's you get access to the Discord still. But
just hit me up at Chuck on Money, and I'll
there you go.
Yeah,
Perfect. And then you know, and even being able just to find a local group of people too, I think that's huge. We got to come together, and I'll kind of leave this as a closing statement. It's something that I really do like, and it's there's a couple quotes in here which I really think is amazing that they added. And this one's under guarding virtue and freedom. And it says, "We in America do not have government by the majority. We have government by the majority who participate. All tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent." And that's by Thomas Jefferson. So if you have a gripe, if you have a concern, if you are not happy with the way that things are, and you want to see something change, you have to be involved. The realm of just simply sitting by and allowing things just to take shape, and then you not being happy when it doesn't turn out the way that you want it to, I'm sorry, but like that, it's not the way that works. So get involved, meet people, find your people, find the people that you can work with, and educate yourselves. Never stop learning, and be the difference you want to see. Like, to me, that is more imperative than ever before. So Charles, I'm going to leave you the last word there, and then we'll hit the outro music, bro.
Yeah. So hit me up on X, or you can find me on Facebook or whatever. You know, Chuck on Money on X is probably the easiest way to find me. What I would recommend is that if you want to see change in your local area, the American Liberty Caucus, we're there for you. We care about helping people make change in their local area, whether you're a libertarian, small government, you know, honestly, whatever, you know, we're there to help people. Our focus is libertarians, freedom. So if you're anti-freedom, you're not going to find a home there. But if you want freedom and liberty, the American Liberty Caucus will help you. We don't care about a lot of your personal opinions and stuff like that. It's really hard at the local level to find people who are willing to work, so we can support you. I know we participated in helping with constitutional carry in North Carolina. We helped with council person trying to get elected to council in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
We've worked on, campaigns in Michigan and, all across the country. And we also are a resource. So if you're having issues with your local government, you can just reach out to us and we'll provide you. We'll point you to where you need to go.
Yeah.
Because we all, people who want liberty and freedom, we all need to come together and work together.
100%.
Because at this point, the government and the powers that be, whatever you want to call them, they're trying to chop us up into little pieces where we can't work together and where we can't actually affect change. And you can be that change at the local level. You just need a little support, understanding the rules, the procedures, getting elected, getting your name out there. And that's what we do.
Yeah. Well said, man. Well said. Well, hey, thank you so much, Charles. I really appreciate you coming at the last minute. I literally texted this guy. I'm just like, hey, man, you want to come on? Because my whole Saturday itinerary is trashed, and it turns out that there's more to talk about. So he's a real one. I really appreciate him taking the time out of his day to do that. And then if you got just a minute or two, I'll chat with you after the show here. With that being said, thank you everybody for coming out, supporting the show, taking the time to watch. I don't know, maybe sometimes I get a little schizophrenic in my rants, but that's all right. It's maybe why you come here. But we will see you all next Saturday, 1700. And I'll try and make sure that I don't screw that up again like I did tonight, because I, for whatever reason, posted my show at, I think it was like 1 or 1:30 or whatever stupid thing it was. So I'll make sure that I do it right the first time next weekend. Go with liberty. Carry that torch with you every single place. Be the difference you seek. And we will see you all on the next one next Saturday. Thank you once again for coming to the Sentinels of Liberty podcast.